Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Jazakallah for joining me on Psychological Wellbeing Lecture. Today, inshallah, we're going to speak about anxiety, depression, abnormal psychology, which includes your phobia, traumatic psychology, and then we're going to go on to some of the solutions from an Islamic perspective, inshallah. So, your definitions of depression and anxiety, we'll start off with those. Depression are feelings of severe despondency and dejection. It starts off with your self doubt, which creeps up and turns quite quickly into depression. Whereas your anxiety is a feeling of worry, nervousness. You're uneasy about something or about a outcome of a situation. There are lots of people, there's many studies and lots of people that do suffer from depression and anxiety. And what we're going to do, inshallah, speak about the possible cures for those and how to minimize your feelings of depression and anxiety. Your symptoms of anxiety, if they persist for several months, they can affect your personal and daily life. So what is the reason, or when do we begin to feel the stress or anxiety or stress on ourselves? So if we look at this diagram, we're talking really about getting from A to B. And you could make the transition from A to B quite easily if you didn't have some unseen or some possible obstacles. And these obstacles represent your stress, home, school or work, depression and anxiety then starts to build up. So it all depends on your obstacles. Now, once those obstacles start to weigh you down, there are 5 specifications of what anxiety or depression do look like. And they are feelings of being tense, feeling of restlessness, finding it quite hard to concentrate due to worry, fearing a loss of control and fearing that something terrible is going to happen. So you have a number of emotions that are going through you. So one of the things that I do want to draw upon is when you start to fear the outcome of something. So remember when we were talking about this, the symptoms are typically affecting your daily life, and it's because you are uneasy about a certain outcome or you're uncertain about an outcome. Now, what we need to remember, if we are uncertain about what's going to happen, or we are worried, or we have fear of something or someone, we need to remind ourselves of this beautiful hadith here, where Abdullah ibn Abbas was told by the Prophet ﷺ, be mindful of Allah and Allah will protect you. If you want to be protected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you need to be mindful of Him. You need to remember Him. A lot of the time when people are suffering from anxiety, depression, or other psychological imbalances, a lot of the time they are suffering from these causes, mainly because they are not mindful of Allah. If you don't have a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that will in turn affect you and make you vulnerable to the attacks of shaitan, and you will be somebody who is at risk of not being protected by the Almighty. I would like to stress here at this point that if you haven't already seen our lectures on Tawheed, please do go over to our YouTube channel and do watch those videos. They are really useful in helping you build your relationship with your Lord, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And your answers lay in that connection. Okay, so if you've not got that connection, that's really what's going to make you vulnerable to the external interventions, and you will be attacked by shaitan. You are not protected by Allah. So that's the first thing. So in order for you to be protected, be mindful of Allah. And the Prophet ﷺ goes on to say, and if the nation were to gather together to benefit you with anything, they could not possibly benefit you with anything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself has not already decreed for you. And He says, if all the people and all the jinn were to gather together to harm you with something, they would not be able to harm you with anything except that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not already prescribed against you. So you need to remember this, that any good that comes to you or any bad that comes to you, any harm or benefit that comes to you, is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already prescribed for you that. So if you are unnecessarily worrying about the outcome of something or the harm that somebody's going to cause you, then remember that this is all the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you really need to be seeking His protection and turning to Him. If you have fear, turn your fear into your du'as and turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Be mindful of Him so that you will gain protection. Recognize and acknowledge Allah in times of ease and prosperity, and know that when something has passed you and it didn't befall you, it wasn't meant for you, and whatever did befall you was not going to pass you by. So don't say ifs and buts. If I wasn't in this situation, if I hadn't listened to that person, or if I hadn't made these choices, I would not have had to face with these circumstances. I would not have been faced with these circumstances. And that's not the type of questioning that we should be doing. What we should be saying is, Alhamdulillah, it was meant for me. And this just gives you that reassurance that anything that happens will happen with the decree and will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you don't need to unnecessarily worry. A lot of people are worrying about circumstances in the future that they have no knowledge of, and they have built up this artificial or superficial fear based on assumptions about a harm that's going to come from somebody or some place, or a harm that they have, and that they have conjured up in their mind, which is not really it's unfounded. It's not really there. It's not a genuine fear, but it's been built up in your mind. So make sure that you do try and rely on, you go and try and build your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and get that reliance on Him. You make sure you are relying on Him. This hadith, the second hadith we're going to look at, is about seeking protection. So protection from jinns. So remember, when you are fearing, or you are fearing something or an outcome of something, it's usually the intervention of jinns or shayateen, or the shaitan is really trying to affect you, with trying to get you to build up superficial fears in your mind that are not founded. They are just assumptions that have turned into fear. Now, you need to be doing your daily ruqyas, which is your falak and nas, and in another hadith, if ikhlas has been also included. Please go on to our website and download a free ruqya guide, step-to-step guide, which teaches you how to perform ruqya correctly and the methods, inshallah. Your anxiety, it will be quite difficult for you to control if it continues, because it becomes, your experiences become depressive, and these feelings then turn to excessive fear. So again, we go back to the first hadith. Building on excessive fear for no reason or on assumptions or suspicion is already prohibited. You need to be relying on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and build your relationship with Him so that you could decrease that excessive fear. Now, excessive worry and difficulty in controlling it, irritability, muscle tension, problems concentrating, restlessness, or even problems with sleeping. So you become so tense that you can't even enjoy your sleep. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that He's created the nahar and the light, the day and the night for us, for certain things to do, so certain activities. So the day is for you to go about your daily routines, your work, and other things that you do normally in a day-to-day life. But the night is there for you to rest. Okay, so that is when you should try and get some sleep. And a lot of people who are depressed do struggle with sleeping, and inshallah that it can decrease if you just put on some Quran recitation, or just read some Quran before going to bed, or at least listen to it while you're trying to go to sleep. And inshallah, that will act as an ease for you. Remember, when you read a Quran, the angels descend, and a sakina descends on you, which is the tranquility. It's great if you read the English Quran, continue to do that in order to understand the meanings. But your Arabic Quran is where you really get the tranquility descending upon you if you do read that. So if you are feeling at ease, get the Quran and start reading it, start reciting it in Arabic. So if we go on to the signs and symptoms of anxiety, and if you have any or most of these, you would fall into this category. So if we go quickly down the list, we're not going to speak about all of them in great detail, but if you are somebody who's, again, panicking, fearing, you have those, and it stems from suspicion, it stems from obsessive thoughts, okay? So or it can be that you're thinking about something that's happened, maybe a conversation, somebody may have said something, maybe they've implied that a threat in something they've said, and you've started to fear. And I'm not saying to ignore that, but I'm saying sometimes what can happen is you can start building up on that fear rather than understanding that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the ultimate one who can protect you. So turn to him in protection. Obviously, if you do feel like that, then you do need to report that if there was some genuine fear. But most of the time in knowing the symptoms of anxiety, we do build up on a artificial, superficial fear. It can be something that's happened to us in the past that keeps coming back into our mind and keeps popping up now and again, and it builds up on that anxiety, and that in turn turns into nightmares. So if your mind is really occupied about certain thoughts, then they do come back to haunt you. Now, you may experience, in that case, problems with sleeping. You may have ritualistic behaviors, so that can be translated into that. And you could experience lots of physical causes you can experience physical causes. So that could be your sweatiness. You can have panic attacks, shortness of breath, beating of your heart quite quickly. You could an inability to stay calm. You can even fear that, dry mouth, numbness, nausea, anything that physically you feel, because you may feel sick to the stomach because of the fact that your anxiety levels have grown too high for you to now for you to now control them. So what we're going to talk about now is the physical, the behavioral, and the emotional effects of anxiety and depression. So remember, it starts off with anxiety and turns into depression if it is not dealt with. Now here, I do really want to mention that you can feel sad and depressed at a normal level, and that's quite acceptable. But then there is one that goes to clinical depression. So your clinical depression is the one that's far more serious. It can affect you physically. So again, we've talked about sleep and insomnia. We've talked about we haven't talked really about your appetite, but in here it does speak about losing your appetite or eating more or less. Even you can experience physical difficulties or physical pain in your head, stomach. You can have digestive problems. There will be in your behavior. If you go on to behavior and attitude, you start to feel loss of pleasure in activities simply because your anxiety levels have driven. And a lot of the time, people that are depressed, they find it very difficult to change behavior because they are already used to a pattern. They cannot motivate themselves to get up and do something. And even though I do recognize that it's really tricky to get you to do something, you really need to start pushing yourself. And we will explain, inshallah, later on in the solutions. When do the solutions hinder your progress? So difficulty in concentrating, remembering, and neglecting responsibilities. All of this is behavioral. So if you do have children, you begin to neglect them because of your anxiety or depression levels. It affects not only you, and affects your family as well and people around you. So what do you want to do? You want to really start thinking about behavioral change. Change your behavior. Behavioral change doesn't come easy. Okay, so you do need to work at it. And as I said, you do need to push yourself in order to change. Your emotional is obviously the feeling of mood swings, constantly crying. You're crying sometimes for no reason, quite a sad feeling of hopelessness or helplessness, the emotion of being worthless, irritable at times, and sometimes agitated, frustrated, anxious, and there can be thoughts of suicide. And here you need to remember the very clear hadith that if anybody who considers taking their life will, or whoever carries out the taking of their life, carries out their suicidal thoughts, they will continue to kill or take their life in the same manner till the day of resurrection. So it is a continuous punishment for that, because in the hadith it says, my slave has brought his death on him quicker than it was prescribed. So make sure that you are not, even if you're having those thoughts, you control them, you speak to someone, get some help. If you need, get some professional help. Do not sit with those thoughts, and do make sure that you are following the advice given in the religion and in Islam, and what the Prophet ﷺ said. I spoke to somebody, and they in the past would have these thoughts and would think that it's an easy way out, and there is no easy way out. It's not an easy way out, especially if you are going to continue to take your life in the way you did in this world and continue to feel that pain and emotion till the day of resurrection. So a lot of the time people think it's just an end here. We don't really consider the reality of the hereafter and what would be, or what state we would be in during that time. So do remember to control those thoughts. Follow the hadiths and the advice that's been given. Strengthen your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why you are having such serious thoughts. You have a dua that you can also read for anxiety. So it says, oh Allah, I seek refuge in you from grief, anxiety, hardships, debt, and being overpowered by men. So here you have grief and anxiety, hardships that cause, so we're talking about your obstacles, the hardships. Debt is another thing that can really cause depression and anxiety. So there is a dua separately in many hadiths that you can read to help you pay off your debt. So it's a dua that you can read in which you ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help you pay off your debt, and that can take away some of your levels of anxiety. Being overpowered by men, and this is what we were discussing first. So having the fear of people or others. Okay, a lot of people in society are being bullied. They're being bullied by different groups and different people. Don't be with those people. Don't choose your company. Okay, if you are being bullied by a group of people, change your company. You'll feel a lot more better and happier if you just change that company, and your levels of anxiety will also be controlled. Nobody has a right to treat you in that way. So do change your company. The Prophet ﷺ has told us to be mindful about the company that we do take and the people that we do sit with. If you are worried about being overtaken by people or being overpowered by people, or being sort of subjected to any sort of discrimination or grief or pain, then inshallah you need to be reading this dua and remembering that first hadith, that nobody can harm you except with the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is what you need to keep telling yourself, that no one can harm me except if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed it already. So here, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-hammi wal-hazani wa-dhul iddaini wa ghulabati rijali. Okay, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you to take protection from that which is hazard, okay, the sadness, the grief, and being empowered by the men or by people. Symptoms of depression: feeling of guilt and worthlessness, we've already mentioned them, sadness and hopelessness, loss in activities, low energy levels, problem in concentrating, and self-harm. Now, if you are somebody that is going through depression, it may be because of this ayah. And whoever turns away from remembrance, indeed he will have a depressed or difficult life. And this is taken from the Quran, Surah 20 and ayah 124. And in the Arabic is ma'ashitan dhanka. Now ma'ashitan is a tight life, and dhanka like a difficult, tight life. So if you're somebody who is not remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you are free from his remembrance, you don't remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you don't pray your salahs, you don't do your dhikrs, you don't remember him, then if we look at the translation or the commentary of Ibn Kathir, he explains concerning this verse that an individual's life will become difficult in this world. They will not find any tranquility, and their heart will be constrained due to the misguidance. So you are somebody who has turned away from the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Maybe you're somebody that doesn't pray the 5 daily prayers. Maybe you're somebody who doesn't fast during the months of Ramadan. Maybe you are somebody who doesn't give their annual charity, the zakat. and Hajj is only obligatory if you can do that. So the only thing you may be fulfilling is your first pillar of faith, which is, or should we say, first pillar of Islam, which is your Shahada. Now, if you're somebody who hasn't fulfilled the 5 pillars and you're only doing your Shahada, yes, you will be affected with levels of anxiety and depression, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that whoever turns away from my remembrance will have a depressed or a difficult life. And the many translations that I've come across, they do put depressed life. Okay, so a depressed life, some say difficult life, but it means more or less the same thing. So you need to get that connection. Again, we're referring back to that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You need to go back and return to him. Remember the advice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to his cousin: be mindful of Allah. Be mindful of Allah so that he then protects you. Okay, you only deserve the protection if you recognize your Lord, if you recognize the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's number one. Number two, what I would like to suggest, if you go on to, again, our YouTube channel and try and listen to the lectures on Islam, Iman, and your faith. So what is the difference between Islam and Iman? And then the highest level, which is the Ihsan. So there's 3 levels in faith. Okay, so there's 3 different levels. When we talk about increasing in our faith, we have to really talk about increasing in the different levels. So you start off by being a Muslim. So if you are somebody who fulfills the 5 pillars, you are somebody who just has done the Shahada, you're fulfilling your 5 pillars, your Salah, your Siyam, and your Hajj, and so on, and you do your Zakat. And you're still depressed, and I've heard people say that they do the 5 pillars and they're still affected with depression, and they've been depressed for quite a long time. So why is it that they are remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but they're still depressed? Well, the thing is that when you do your 5 pillars, you've submitted to the deen, you've submitted to Islam, but you've not yet become a believer. You only become a believer when you go beyond the 5 pillars. So you do your 5 pillars, you've become a Muslim, you've not become a believer. So again, when you do your 5 pillars, you become a Muslim. You do not become a believer. In order to be considered a believer, you need to now start fulfilling the 6 articles of faith. So you need to start building upon your faith. Once you build up on your faith, then you are a mu'min or a mu'minah. You are somebody who is a believer, okay? And after that level, you then go on to the level of God consciousnus. In the hadith, it mentioned 3 levels, but you can divide it into 4, because the 3rd level, it includes 2 separate levels. It includes the level of muttaqin and muhsin. So you have the level of that God consciousness, which is a higher level, okay, and the level of ihsan, which is also the high level of God consciousness. And inshallah, if you go on to that video, it will tell you the difference. But if you're somebody who is praying, you're remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you're asking the question now, well, why am I depressed? Then you need to start building upon it. This is a reminder to you from Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you, you need to build up on your levels of Iman. You need to now start working. You need to increase yourself. You need to increase and reach the higher levels of your faith. Okay, so those are the baby steps. Doing your 5 pillars are your baby steps. Okay, now you need to start to think about how to improve your levels of Iman and become a stronger person, and from Muslim going on to becoming a believer. There's an ayah in the Quran when the Bedouins embraced Islam. Okay, so they submitted into Islam, and they said, we are now believers. And then ayah was sent down saying, do not say you are believers, rather say you have submitted. You have become Muslims, you've submitted, you've accepted Islam. Do not say you're believers, because faith has not yet entered your hearts. So if you are somebody who's doing 5 pillars at the moment, it may be the faith hasn't really entered your heart. So work on improving your levels of faith, inshallah. Okay, so that was somebody who may be praying but still depressed, and those people who are not praying at all, both of you fall into this category where you may have a depressed or difficult life. If you are somebody who is, as I said, doing 5 pillars, you need to now start thinking about becoming a more, reaching a more higher level in your faith. So depression can be a test. So again, if you are somebody who is praying, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be, testing you. It could be a test if you are at the highest level of your faith, or it could be a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It could be a reminder. So if you're somebody who is not praying at all, or if you are somebody who has just submitted themselves to Islam and you're not yet, you reach the levels of a mu'min or mu'minah, the levels of believer, then inshallah, this is a reminder for you. So you should be thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and start to increase in your levels of faith. I know a Rewit that embraced Islam due to the fact that she was suffering from psychological imbalances, or in fact she was suffering from abnormal psychology, which I will discuss when we discuss the topic of abnormal psychology. It can be a punishment for rejection. So it may be that you've done something, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is punishing you. So here you need to repent and return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is merciful. He will forgive any sin unless it be shirk. So go return back to him, inshallah. We have some solutions already. So you have your incarnations and the relief that they provide for you. So your Ayatul Kursi is a protection against shaitan for the entire night, okay, or the entire day, should we say. So you'd be protected from the shaitan for the full day. The Mudditan, which is something that protects you from the jinn, the people, and evil eye. Okay, so here you are asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect you from not any jinns, but people. If you are fearing anybody, if you are fearing any external interventions, both of these are covered in Qul A'udhu Birabbin Nas, in Surah An-Nas. Then you have your Falaq, which is your evil eye. So again, you are asking for protection for those things that can threaten your psychological balances. We've already given the dua for anxiety and against anxiety, so you could be reading that. And then if you've not already attended one of our past courses on jinn possession and magic, you can download the material from our website. We haven't got a recording for that. Inshallah, we will try and I will try and inshallah put that on for you. But Fatiha is the protection against any possession or jinn intervention, and you need to be reading that, and there is a detailed method on how to do that. So please do go back to the website and download the Ruqya step-to-step guide. Obviously, Western psychology talks about cognitive behavioral therapy, which is your CBT. And basically what cognitive behavioral therapy does is change the way you think and behave. So they try and change your mindset so that your behavior then is changed. So there's lots of talk therapy, but these are short-term techniques. They try and change the way you behave or your thought patterns. Now, they are on the right lines, so they do consider changing your mindset, changing your behavior, and that's really important. But you're not going to do that until you submit to a higher being, because once you submit and once you reach the levels of higher consciousness, God consciousness, you're always going to be mindful of what you're doing, what your actions are, and who is watching you. See, when you're on your own, right, and all these thoughts enter your mind, and you're not really focusing on the deen, and you're not taking the advice that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you, you're allowing your mind to run free. Okay, it's a running free rein. Okay, you have no control over it. And even if you do try and change your thought patterns, you've got to do it on your own, and it is really difficult. Even if you think that you will do it for your loved one, again, it's very short-lived. But once you submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you submit out of love or fear, and you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always watching you, and here we're talking about your high level of consciousness, then you are mindful of your behavior, because you know you are accountable for what you do, for what you say, and somebody is watching you, and you have the records that are taking in account, the recorders, the angels that are recording, taking in account what you do, what you say. So you are far more likely to bring about a change once you acknowledge your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you recognize he's your Lord who is always watching you. So you are now more conscious of him, and you will take on his advice. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you advice in the Quran. You try and do that, you try and fulfill those advices, you change your thought patterns, because your ultimate goal is to now please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has given us the advice and techniques that are beneficial for us, but we do not understand them. And once you start to learn what they are and you start to fulfill them, you will find that all the issues or the problems that you have encountered have been put to rest. They have been taken care of. And it's all because you have not acknowledged your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here again, once you submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will inshallah find that your behavior, your thought patterns are automatically changed, because once you submit, whether out of love or fear for Allah, you will start to follow him and be in obedience to him. So in total obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will protect you, and any advice he's given you is for your own protection. Inshallah, we're going to see what types of advice he's given. So Islam does have a cure. The muwadditan, as prescribed by the Prophet ﷺ, they are protection against what? They are against what we've seen here, against the evil eye, jinns, people as well. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you submit to him, he's going to give you the techniques to employ in your own daily life that will act as a protection for you. So you have the muwadditan to help you, protect you from jinns and humans and evil eye. Your ruqya is cures you, okay? It's not sedate you heavily. It does not, it's just like pills. So you know when you are feeling high levels of anxiety or depression, and you go to the doctors, what do? They prescribe you with medication. And I know somebody who had antidepressants, really quite badly affected with the depression, but slept the entire day, neglecting her child. So the ruqya that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prescribed for you is a cure that does not sedate you. Okay, you don't sleep throughout the day. It's not heavily medicated. You're not heavily medicated with that. Islamic cures are very practical, and they're powerful methods to help you. Medical professionals have stated that alcohol and drugs can add to the symptoms of anxiety and depression. They can actually be a cause of a lot. And in schizophrenia, in cases of schizophrenia, they've said a lot of it is drugs. Two of the harmful things Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already in his subhanallah wisdom has forbade us from doing. So in the Quran, we are already forbidden from doing that. So that's what I've said. If you are following the advice given to you by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you are saving yourself from a lot of headache, a lot of pain, and a lot of psychological imbalances or abnormal psychology. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not put down each advice and told you the psychological imbalances that may come if you do not obey me, or this. It is enough for us to hear and obey. Okay, we hear and we obey. This is what it says in the Quran. We hear and we obey, we submit. We don't ask why, how, and how will it help me. But if you go down and look through the hadiths and the Quran, and you look at all the advice that we are asked to follow, subhanallah, what you will see, mashallah, what you will see is how effective they are to help you in controlling your mindsets and in controlling your behavior, and not allowing you to fall into high levels of anxiety, depression, and have symptoms that could really affect you and neglect your family. So one that does not consume such substances, then you are somebody whose brain is weakened. If you are consuming such substances, then your brain weakens, whether that is medication or substance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prohibited for you. It just slows your mind down, it weakens your signals and just numbs your brain. That's all it does. So CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is basically focusing on your thoughts and how that affects your behavior, which we've seen. But Islam provides you with all the tools already. You're just not following them. The Islamic way of life seizes all mental health issues or challenges. It really does. It's just you haven't to recognize what they are, or you don't follow what you've been told to follow. If you do need a counseling session, a therapist, and can't afford one, not to worry, you do have a 24-hour counseling session available with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you put your head down in sujood and you take away all your worries in that position. Talk to your Lord, offload everything, and inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will protect you. That is again you being mindful. You're not turning to your Lord, you're not speaking to your Lord, you're not telling him your worries, and that is what's affecting you, because you're not built that relationship. Remember, the best form of worship is dua. You are turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves that his slaves turn to him. So turn to him, make sure that you've acknowledged your Lord and submit to him and turn to him with all your worries. And that is your amazing counseling session that is available. You don't need to talk to people. You really just need to offload and really just connect with your Lord, inshallah. So here we're talking about unhelpful ways that people think. So the ways we think are quite unhelpful and harmful. They're unhelpful because they put certain ideas or seeds into our mind which grow into psychological problems, and then in turn they translate into our behavior. So for example, I might be somebody who's suspicious. Okay, so I'm so suspicious that every time my spouse leaves the house, I'm thinking that he or she, okay, so for me, he, but if you're somebody who has unhelpful ways that you think, every time your spouse leaves the house, you feel that they're up to no good, and that worry, that thought starts to fester into your mind, and it becomes a psychological problem. How? You've built up anxiety. It becomes into a depression, suspicion, okay, panic, fear. All of these are your psychological problems. Then what you do, you start to follow, you start to spy, you start to listen into conversations. Spying, following, listening into conversations are all against the deen. Anybody who listens to a conversation, in the hadith it says, molten love or lead should be poured into your ear for that sin. Spying on people, it is a sin, it is from shaitan, and you don't spy. But all of that can lead into psychological issues. If you translate it into behavior, your spouse eventually may leave you because they can't deal with all the anxiety that you are feeling that is now being affected by you shedding that onto them, and they are feeling that from you. People can learn more beneficial ways of thinking and behaving, and that's exactly what CBT is. You need to learn new habits to relieve your symptoms of mental physical conditions. And practitioners of CBT say that problems arise when people arise from the meanings people give to events. Okay, so maybe something's happened in your life. It wasn't as bad. Okay, so maybe the paranoia. Sometimes people are paranoid, and what happens, something's happened, somebody's made a comment or a remark, and you've thought in your mind for it to be something extremely far more, far more higher or far more intense in the way they implied it. So what you've done in turn is taken that minor little remark, and it's now being exaggerated in your mind, and it builds up because of the way you've interpreted that event. So you can exaggerate something in your mind because of your extreme paranoia. You may be somebody who cannot function comfortably in different situations. A lot of the times that we fear or have problems because of our anxiety is because we don't have a good coping ability in regards to what our demands, expectations, or stresses are. So maybe they are weighing us down, and our coping ability isn't really at the level that it should be. It could be, one of the solutions could be, you increase your coping ability by decreasing your demands, expectations, or stresses. So this is somebody who's probably taken too much on. I know some people, they have families, they're studying full time, they're working full time, they're teaching. So this could be too much, you've taken too much on. So what you need to do is review what you have. Okay, drop a few courses if you need to, get some help with your family if you need to get some help. So anything that you feel that, okay, I've taken too much on, I cannot cope anymore, remember that the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, you have, which we'll go to, that you have to take care of your demands and expectations. And he gives us, alhamdulillah, really good advice on how to do that. The second solution is to balance both out. So you have your coping ability that matches your demands, expectations, and stresses. So you don't take too much on, you take on as much as you can deal with. So that's another coping ability, which is really good, alhamdulillah. So yes, you either can increase or decrease, but in Islam, we want to talk about balancing. We always talk about the middle path. We talk about a balance between two things, okay? So this is the hadith that we want to talk about. So the Prophet ﷺ asked Abdullah ibn Umar, he said, do you fast all day and do you stand in prayer all night? So fasting all day and standing in all night. And he says, yes. So what did the Prophet ﷺ say? Do not do that. Your body has a right over you. Your eyes have a right over you. Your wife has a right over you. So not only do you have to take care of your body, your eyes, meaning your sleep, your health, but also your family. Okay, your family, your wife, your children, you have to take care of them. So everything in your life has a right. So fulfill the rights of all people, fulfill the rights of your family, take on what you can deal with. So if we look at this hadith, we want to be giving right to our body, eyes, and our family. Once we do that, and if we've taken on, if we have a job and we want to study, we want to take on a course, we want to, take on some other adventures in our life, we want to go traveling, anything that we want to do, think about your demands, expectations, and how they can cause you stress. So a lot of the time people can get really stressed. How does that match with your coping ability? Okay, so take on what you can deal with. Don't take on too much. Minimize what you can't deal with at the moment if there's too much on your plate. I know somebody who has a family, taken 2 bachelor degrees, teachers as well, subhanallah. So too much going on, and you will start to feel that stress. So remember, everything in your life, it has a right on you. If you fulfill the rights of everything, your body, your health, and your family, then in turn you will start to decrease what you've taken on. Okay, because you cannot take on 4 or 5 courses if you are going to fulfill this hadith. Okay, so you need to create a balance, inshallah. Remember, ad-din al-wasat, so it is the middle path. Once you've balanced it out, and once you've given rights to the people in your family and your health, and you've managed to get some sleep because your eyes have a right over you, don't tell yourself that you can't deal with anything. So a lot of the time what happens, something's befallen you, or you find yourself suddenly in a situation, and your instant thought is, I can't deal with this. This is too much for me. This is beyond my capacity. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you, La yukallifu Allahu nafsan illa wus'aha. Allah does not charge a soul except with its capacity. Whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throws at you, it is because you have the ability to deal with that. Each individual does have a fighter inside them. Okay, but it's up to you to find or suppress that. So do remember that if you've been given anything, it is because you can deal with this. So Islam teaches you to fight those emotions, and it gives you the tools to combat some negative thought where you tell yourself that I can't do this. That's all for today, inshallah. What we're going to do in our next video is speak about abnormal psychology. Jazakallah khair for watching, and please subscribe to our channel so that you can, inshallah, get alerted when we do upload our next video. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.